At Thanksgiving, my sister lifted her glass like she was accepting an award, smiling as she announced that my parents were signing the house over to her and that I'd get nothing. The room cheered. Someone actually whistled. But they didn't notice Dad's hands shaking or the way Mom kept avoiding my eyes. They didn't know I'd already seen the foreclosure notices hidden in the garage. They didn't know Madison's name was on paperwork she'd never signed. But what they didn't know was, before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Stories like mine don't just happen in movies. They happen at real tables under real holiday lights with people who swear they love you. Your support helps this story reach the ones who need it most. I didn't grow up in a loud, chaotic household. Ours was the quiet kind, the kind that looked perfect from the outside. A tidy blue house on a calm Ohio street, roses trimmed lawn, always mowed. People used to say the Carters were the kind of family you wished lived next door. They didn't know that silence can be sharper than shouting. Silence can cut. And in our home it did, over and over, thin slices you didn't notice until you were bleeding. One of my earliest memories is a dinner when I was 7. I still remember the clatter of utensils, the smell of baked chicken, the soft hum of the dishwasher. I reached for another roll, but Mom tapped my hand lightly and said, "Let your sister go first, sweetheart." She placed the warm roll onto Madison's plate, not mine. Madison laughed, crumbs caught on her cheeks. I swallowed the sting without knowing why it hurt so much. I didn't know it back then, but this would matter later, the first mark in a long line of invisible bruises. Another time in 3rd grade, I won a regional writing contest. I remember clutching the cheap paper certificate the way my heart thumped with pride. We got home, and I waited thinking maybe they'd take a picture. Maybe we'd hang it on the fridge. Instead, Dad was rushing to get Madison to her dance rehearsal. "We're late," he muttered, shooing me aside as if I were blocking the door. Madison twirled once for him, giggling. My certificate wrinkled in my hand. No one asked to see it. No one asked what I wrote. I folded the paper tightly until it nearly tore. I swallowed it again. But it carved deeper than I thought. As we grew older, the pattern grew with us. There was a Christmas when I was 12. The living room smelled like pine and cinnamon, the tree lights blinking lazily. Madison ripped open a brand new pink bike, screaming with joy. My gift was a second-hand coat that still had plenty of life in it, as Mom put it. I tried smiling. I tried pretending it didn't matter. But a part of me chipped off that day, small and sharp, the kind of shard that hides until you step on it years later. By high school, I had learned how to disappear gracefully. I worked part-time at a grocery store, stocking shelves, pushing carts through the slush-filled parking lot during winter. Sometimes I used the little money I had to help with bills. Dad thanked me once, a half-hearted pat on the back, before he went back to the TV. Weeks later, I overheard Madison bragging to her friends about how she got her nails done with the money we saved up from Haley's job. They laughed. I felt something twist under my ribs. I didn't say a word. I just swallowed it again. But it never really went away. When I was accepted into a college in Chicago, the first person I told was my grandmother, Grace. She looked at me with that warm, steady gaze of hers, eyes clear and sharp behind her glasses. "You're going to build a life they can't ignore," she whispered. Then, she hugged me like she believed it. When I told my parents, the reaction was different. Dad looked away. Mom said, "So you're just leaving?" Madison asked if she could have my room. I packed anyway. Chicago hit me like a new world. The cold wind off Lake Michigan, the noise the lights reflecting on wet pavement at night. I got a small apartment and a job as a data analyst. My days were a blur of spreadsheets, coffee that tasted burnt, and evenings staring out my window at the trains rushing by. Every holiday I drove back to Ohio, pretending our family hadn't changed, pretending I was still part of something. I didn't know it then, but every trip home was another stitch tightening a thread that would eventually snap. Then came the phone call, 6 months before Thanksgiving. Mom's voice was upbeat, too upbeat. "Come home this weekend," she said. "We just need you to sign something simple." Her tone was sugary, but I'd lived long enough to taste the sour beneath it. I didn't know it that night, but that call would pull me into the darkest truth my family had ever buried. I drove home that weekend with a strange heaviness stirring in my chest. The sky was gray, the kind of low-hanging winter sky that makes everything feel closer, tighter, like the clouds are pressing down on you. The Carter house looked the same as always, white shutters, wind chimes tapping against each other, the porch light buzzing with a faint flicker. But something in the air felt off. The silence didn't just cut, it swallowed. Dad greeted me with a stiff nod. Mom wrapped her arms around me too quickly, her perfume thick and sweet, masking something sour beneath. Madison was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. "Hey," she said, a single syllable, flat, dismissive. I felt the old sting rise, the familiar burn under my ribs. I didn't know it then, but that cold greeting would echo in a much louder silence months later. They sat me at the dining table. The same table where so many of our holidays had played out, where I had swallowed disappointment like stale bread. Dad slid a folder toward me. "Refinance," he said. "Better rates. Just a quick signature." His voice was calm, but too calm, like an actor reading lines from a script he hadn't rehearsed enough. I opened the folder. Pages and numbers blurred together. Thick stacks, small print numbers crossed out and rewritten. "Why is there so much?" I asked. Dad shrugged. "Just paperwork. You don't need to read it." That sentence should have been the alarm. But I wanted to trust them. I wanted so badly to believe they weren't using me. Still, something in my gut tightened a knot I couldn't ignore. "Can I take these with me?" I asked. Mom's smile faltered. Dad's jaw flickered. "Why complicate things?" he said, too quickly, too sharply. The air around us thickened. Madison didn't even look up. She was too busy filming something for Instagram. The absurdity of it struck me, my life being rewritten at this table while my sister curated hers for strangers online. I didn't know it then. But that moment, her smiling at her screen while I stared at lies in black ink, would become a memory burned into me. I took the folder anyway. Back in Chicago, the city lights felt colder than usual. My apartment felt smaller. I placed the folder on my desk, the paper edges slightly curled like the lies inside had begun to warp even the physical world. My lawyer, Ava, flipped through the documents with a growing tension in her shoulders. Her eyebrows pulled together, her lips tightened. "This isn't a refinance," she said finally. "This is a transfer of liability." My throat tightened. "Liability for what?" She slid a page toward me. "Your parents took out a second mortgage. They're behind. A lot. If you sign, you take responsibility for everything." They didn't mention that everything in me went still, like my body forgot how to move for a full 3 seconds. The air in the room felt colder, sharper. But why me? I asked, though I already knew the answer, because I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't cause problems. I didn't know it back then, but this would become the moment that split my life into before and after. When Ava called the next morning with more findings, late notices, foreclosure warnings, penalties stacked like sandbags, I felt something shift in me. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Resolve, maybe. Or the beginning of it. 2 months later, Dad called again. The house phone's screen lit up with his name while I sat in my apartment watching the snow fall against the window. His voice cracked as he spun a story about Mom's medical bills. I offered to pay the hospital directly. The silence that followed was long enough to expose every lie he'd tried to hide. It's not exactly medical, he finally admitted. I felt my chest hollow out, not just from the lie, but from how easily he had expected me to swallow it. The weeks between that call and Thanksgiving felt stretched thin, pulled tight like fabric about to tear. Madison posted hints online photos on the porch captions, like big changes coming emojis of keys and houses. Mom called me one night, her voice too bright. "Madison's so excited about hosting once everything is finalized," she said. Finalized. She said it like it was a wedding gift, not a ticking bomb wrapped in ribbon. I didn't know it then, but their excitement was the match. And Thanksgiving would be the spark that lit the whole thing on fire. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a thin frost over the Carter lawn, glittering under a pale sun that looked too soft for what was coming. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, engine humming, breath fogging the windshield. I could already feel the tension through the walls. I didn't know it then, but every step through that house would be another crack widening. When I walked inside, the smell of roasted turkey and sweet potatoes hung thick in the air, but it didn't feel warm. It felt staged, like a set built for a show I hadn't been invited to rehearse for. Mom greeted me with a tight smile, her lipstick too bright, her hug too quick. I felt her hands tremble when she let go. Madison swirled into the kitchen, wearing a cream dress that shimmered under the overhead lights. "You made it," she said, voice thin, like a blade dipped in honey. Her eyes flicked over me, checking for something weakness maybe, or permission. I didn't offer either. I hung my coat and walked into the dining room. That's when I noticed it. The missing chair. The one that was always placed beside mine. Gone. Not shifted. Not moved. Gone. A small detail, but the kind that holds an entire message inside it. I stared at the empty space for a second longer than I should have. Madison caught my stare. "Oh," she said lightly. "I thought the table looked cleaner without it." Cleaner. Like I was clutter. The sting pricked quietly beneath my ribs, familiar and ancient. Another wound swallowed silently. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water, hoping to steady myself. That's when I saw her laptop open on the counter. A bright email subject line lit the screen. Title transfer, final draft. My heart knocked once hard. Before I could read more, Madison hurried in, snapping the laptop closed with a sharp click. "Private stuff," she muttered. Her cheeks flushed. Her hands shook. She knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. The hurt flared sharp but silent. Later, while everyone buzzed about the turkey being the juiciest ever, Ethan found me in the hallway. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, brows knitted. "Can I ask you something?" he said. His voice carried a different weight, concern, not performance. "What's going on with the house?" My throat tightened. Why would you think something's going on? Because Madison won't tell me anything he said. Every time I bring it up, she changes the subject or gets snappy. "And your parents?" "I don't know, Haley. Something feels weird." He wasn't wrong. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath. I opened my mouth to speak, but footsteps approached. Madison appeared, smiling too brightly. "Babe, come help me with the wine." He looked at me again. A silent question. I didn't answer. Not yet. I swallowed the truth, but it cut on the way down. Soon after, Aunt Claire cornered me near the living room, her eyes sparkling the way they do after too many sips of holiday punch. "You must be so proud of your sister," she chirped. "Taking on the house like that. Such responsibility for someone her age." I froze. "What do you mean?" she giggled. Oh, sweetheart, we all know. Your parents told us weeks ago. Madison stepping up. It's wonderful. My ears rang. Weeks ago. They'd been celebrating behind my back for weeks. My parents hadn't just blindsided me, they had rehearsed an entire narrative without me in it. My chest tightened, heat rising under my skin. I forced a smile, my jaw aching with the tension. That's great, I said. But the words tasted like metal. I slipped away before she could say more, the edges of her voice fading behind me as that familiar wound deepened. I found myself wandering toward the garage, needing air, needing space. The cold hit me immediately, a slap compared to the warmth inside. The garage smelled like dust and gasoline shadows stretching across old boxes. When I brushed past a stack of holiday decorations, something toppled. A cardboard box split open on the floor, letters spilled out. Bank envelopes, dozens of them. I picked one up, then another, then another. 10 months of warnings. 10 months of final notices. 10 months of lies wrapped in silence. And beneath them, a printed contract unfinished with Madison's name, typed neatly under grantee. My breath caught. They had planned this long before the refinance lie, long before the June phone call. They were dragging her into it too. A different child, same trap. I stared at the paperwork, my pulse hammering in my ears. The cold air bit at my fingertips, but the anger rising inside me burned hot. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I felt sick or furious. Behind me, the door creaked open. Mom stood there, eyes wide, breath shaky. "What are you doing in here?" she whispered. I held up a letter. "What is all this?" She glanced at the papers, then at me, panic flickering across her face. "This isn't the time, Haley." "That's funny," I said. "It seems like it was the time for everyone else." Her lips trembled. "Please don't ruin today." There it was again, the line they'd used my entire life. My silence, my compliance, my ability to swallow pain, that was what kept the family together. I felt something inside me splinter. I didn't ruin today, I thought. You already did. But I didn't say it. Not yet. I swallowed the truth once more, and it scraped a deeper cut than any before. I stepped back into the house with the cold still clinging to my skin, like the garage air had followed me in. The voices in the living room felt too loud, too cheery, their laughter bouncing off the walls with a brittle edge. It was the kind of sound people make when they're pretending nothing is wrong. The kind of sound my family specialized in. I walked past the kitchen archway and caught Dad whispering to a cluster of relatives. His voice was hushed, but not enough. "Madison deserves it," he said. She stayed. Haley left. "It's only fair." Left. That word sank into me like a stone into water. I didn't realize Mom had seen me until she rushed forward, placing a hand on Dad's arm. "Not now," she hissed under her breath. Her eyes darted to me and away again, as if eye contact might ignite something she couldn't control. Dad cleared his throat, forcing a smile. "Dinner's almost ready," he said, pretending he hadn't just shoved a knife between my ribs. I nodded once, keeping my face neutral. But inside, something cracked so loudly, I was surprised the others didn't hear it. The afternoon dragged on with that same cloying sweetness, the fake laughter, the too tight hugs, the constant glances exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. Every time I entered a room, conversations dipped, then restarted with suspicious enthusiasm. It felt like walking through a series of staged scenes, each one slightly misaligned, like props on a theater stage that didn't fit the set. At one point, I walked into the living room and found all the cousins gathered around Madison. She was showing them something on her phone. I heard her just as she tapped to the next photo. "This'll be the guest room," she said. And this'll be my office. I'll get so much content here. Content. My family home reduced to her backdrop. Someone noticed me. "Oh, Haley," my cousin Mark said. Madison showed us the layout. "It's gorgeous." The layout, I asked, my voice steady but cold. Madison froze. Her thumb hovered over her phone screen. "It's nothing," she said. "Just ideas." But it wasn't nothing. Because I recognized the image's floor plans. My parents must have given them to her. Plans they'd never sent me. Plans they'd kept from me. I felt the floor tilt. Not literally, but enough that my breath caught. "Congrats," I said quietly. "Must be nice to be Mom's favorite." The room went still. Someone coughed. Madison's cheeks flushed a deep red. For a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, confusion, maybe fear. But she blinked it away. "That's not what this is," she snapped. "You're overreacting. Sometimes a wound doesn't bleed. It just burns." Dinner preparations continued with a forced rhythm. Carrots chopped too aggressively. Cabinets slammed. Madison humming too loudly. Dad pretending to check the oven for the third time. Mom fluttering between rooms like a nervous bird. The tension built like steam behind a sealed door. In the middle of it all, Grandma Grace sat quietly in her armchair, watching everything with those sharp eyes of hers. When I passed behind her, she reached out and lightly touched my wrist. "Truth has a way of showing up," she whispered. Just 6 words. But they steadied me more than anything else that day. As the sun set, the house dimmed into that familiar golden glow that always used to make Thanksgiving feel magical. Not this time. The lights felt too dim, stretching shadows across the walls like long, crooked fingers. When we finally sat at the table, I felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes on me, even though none of them were looking directly at me. They were all waiting for the moment, waiting for the announcement, waiting for the performance. The turkey gleamed under the chandelier. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly. My heart thudded slow and heavy, each beat sinking deeper into the pit of my stomach. That's when Dad stood up to carve the turkey. Normal, expected, but his hands shook. Not a lot, but enough. Mom reached over to steady him, whispering something I couldn't hear. Madison smiled at them, her teeth bright under the warm light. She looked like she was glowing. She always glowed when she believed the world was bending in her direction. I tried to focus on the food, on the mashed potatoes, the cranberry sauce, the smell of rosemary drifting off the turkey. But everything tasted muted, like I was eating cardboard memories. Halfway through the meal, I caught Ethan staring at me from across the table. His brows were furrowed, his jaw tight. And in that moment, I realized something important. He wasn't confused anymore. He was suspicious. Of them. Not me. Madison noticed too. What she demanded, her voice sharp. He shook his head. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing, and she knew it. A few minutes later, Mom raised her glass for a toast. Classic, predictable. Her voice trembled slightly as she began thanking everyone for coming, for being the heart of this family. Her words felt heavy with irony, almost suffocating. As she spoke, I noticed Dad sliding a folder under the tablecloth near Madison's seat. Subtle, quick, but not quick enough. Madison placed her hand over it, trying to look casual. A hot wave rolled down my spine. The same folder I'd seen months before. The same pages they tried to make me sign. The same trap wearing a different ribbon. My pulse hammered my palms, slick. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer, tightening around me. I watched as Madison's fingers curled protectively around the folder, her shoulders straightening as if she'd been crowned with something holy. Even before she tapped her glass, I knew what was coming. I felt it. A storm brewing beneath the surface. She lifted her glass slowly, savoring the spotlight. Her eyes sparkled. Her smile widened. And in that moment, right as she inhaled to speak, I knew. This wasn't escalation anymore. This was the edge of collapse. Another wound split open quietly inside me. Madison tapped her glass twice, the soft chime slicing through the room like a blade. The conversation stopped. Forks paused midair. The chandelier light trembled slightly above us, as if even the bulbs sensed what was coming. She rose from her seat with the kind of confidence only someone raised to shine could summon. Her cream dress shimmered every time she breathed. She pressed a hand to her chest, pretending to look humble, then smiled wide enough to show every polished tooth. So she began, laughter already bubbling in her voice. Mom and Dad have decided something really special. She waited, milking the suspense. They're signing the house over to me. She beamed. And Haley gets nothing. The room erupted. Claps, cheers, a whistle from somewhere near the end of the table. Someone slapped Dad on the back. About damn time, Mom dabbed her eyes like she was witnessing a proposal. A cousin raised his glass. To Madison, the new homeowner. But all the noise washed over me like static. I sat perfectly still. I didn't blink. I didn't sip my wine. I just watched Madison, letting my silence settle the way cold settles into bone. She mistook it for defeat. That's right, she continued, her voice bright. I'll be taking on the future of this home. It's a big responsibility. But I gently placed my fork down. The metal kissed the plate with a soft clink that cut through the noise louder than a knife. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Should I tell them, or will you? The effect was instant. The room dropped into an eerie silence, like someone had sucked the air out of it. Dad's face drained of color. His hand slipped, his fork clattering against his plate. Mom froze, mid-dab napkin pressed to her cheek. Madison's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face. Grandma Grace exhaled sharply, the breath of someone who'd been waiting far too long for the truth to catch up. Tell us what, Madison asked, her voice too thin to hide the tremor in it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick folder, the one I had carried like a weapon for months. I set it on the table, not opening it yet, just letting it sit there like an unexploded bomb. Before you celebrate, I said softly, you should probably know the condition the house is in. Dad straightened abruptly. Haley not here. Funny, I said, leaning back. You seemed comfortable making your announcement here. Whispers rippled across the table. Aunt Claire leaned forward. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Madison's breath hitched. What condition, she snapped. I opened the folder. The pages spilled out overdue notices, penalty letters, foreclosure warnings. I slid one summary page across the table, pushing it gently toward her. They're behind on payments, I said. On 2 mortgages. The second one was taken out without telling anyone. Dad slammed a hand on the table. You are twisting this, really? I held up another document. Because this one says the bank doesn't agree with you. Mom finally found her voice. Haley, sweetheart, you're making it sound worse than what I cut in. Than the truth. Madison shook her head slowly, staring at the papers as if they were written in another language. That's not possible. They told me it was all paid off. I tilted my head. Did they tell you, I asked, keeping my voice steady, that you're inheriting over $100,000 in debt? Gasps. Audible gasps. Ethan pushed back his chair. Debt, he said, voice cracking. You told me the house was clean. You said your parents had everything under control. Madison reached toward him, but he pulled his arm away. You lied, he said. You dragged me into this without telling me anything. I didn't know, she cried. He shook his head, stepping back from her as though the truth were something he could physically feel. I can't start a life with someone who hides a mess like this. He turned and walked out. Just walked out. Past the turkey, past the stunned relatives, out the front door. The door slammed behind him, rattling the windows. Madison collapsed into her chair, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked suddenly small, like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. "This isn't my fault," she whispered. "I know," I said quietly. "It never was." Dad's face twisted. "You ruined everything." I met his glare with absolute calm. "No," I said. "You ruined everything the moment you tried to hand your debt to your daughters like it was a family heirloom." Mom choked out, "You're tearing this family apart." A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. It was already broken. "I'm just not hiding the cracks anymore," relatives murmured. Some looked away, some looked angry. Others finally saw what had been invisible for years. That was when the knock came. One hard, deliberate knock. Everyone froze. The door opened, and a woman stepped inside, a plain suit, a badge clipped to her belt. Her expression was calm, professional, unreadable. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," she said. "I'm Investigator Rivera. I need to speak with you regarding your mortgage records." Dad went sheet white. Mom swayed in her seat. Whispers exploded. A cousin cursed under his breath. Madison covered her mouth. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply watched as truth finally took its rightful place in the room. And as Investigator Rivera stepped deeper into the house, asking questions in her calm, steady tone, I felt something settle inside me. Something cold. Something clear. The storm had hit. But I was no longer the one drowning. After Investigator Rivera finished her questions, the house fell into a silence so heavy it felt physical. Plates sat untouched. Candles guttered in their holders. The once perfect Thanksgiving table looked like the aftermath of a storm still standing, but stripped of its shine. Dad slumped in his chair, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Mom kept wiping tears, even though they had stopped falling. Madison sat twisted toward the door as if Ethan might walk back in if she wished hard enough. No one looked at me, but they all felt me. I stood slowly, the legs of my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound made several relatives flinch. "I never wanted this," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. All I ever wanted was honesty. Mom reached for me, fingers trembling. "Haley, please. Tell her you misunderstood. Tell her they're wrong." I stepped back before she could touch me. "I didn't misunderstand," I said. "I finally understood." Dad lifted his head, eyes bloodshot. "You could have come to us privately." "You didn't come to me privately when you tried to make me sign your debt," I replied. "You did it at this table, in front of everyone." "So did I." No one argued. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair. As I slipped it on, I felt Grandma Grace's gaze on me. When I looked her way, she nodded once, small, firm, proud. The kind of nod that said, "Keep going." At the doorway, Madison whispered, "What am I supposed to do now?" I paused, hand on the doorknob. "Figure out who you are without the lies they built around you," I said. "It's harder than it sounds." When I stepped outside, the air was cold enough to sting my lungs, but it felt clean. For the first time in years, clean. In my car, I reached into my bag and pulled out the second folder, the one no one knew about. Copies of forged signatures, recorded calls, email chains proving intent, and one document with a note from Ava. "This is the leverage you need. They thought tonight was the end of it, but they didn't know they'd just handed me the one weapon I needed. And I wasn't done. Not even close. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Stories like this aren't just drama, they're reality for so many people who were taught to stay quiet. Your support helps this channel reach those who need to know they aren't alone. Leave a comment, share your experience, and tell me what part of this story hit you the hardest. And stay tuned. This story isn't over. Not for me, not for them, not even close.